Let us pray. Dear kind and gracious Father, we just want to thank you so much for bringing us all here safely today. We want to thank you for all the good that you do for us. Thank you for everything you do for us, Lord. Be with us as we go through this committee. Help us to do whatever is best for our country, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Member Charles. Are there apologies for absence? No apologies for absence. Yeah?
Apology for Member Holness. Apology for Member Chin. Member Wilson is going to be a little late. Member Clark is on his way. And Member Miller should be here too. So apologize.
Okay, thank you. You got all of those? Sorry, just repeat the last couple that you said. Oh, the others are just running late, but okay, thank you. Let me again welcome you to this meeting of the Public Accounts Committee. Last week in Parliament, there was a document tabled from the Ministry of Finance, which was an internal audit of the Auditor General's department. In discussions with the Auditor General, I'm going to have the PAC look at this matter next week at our meeting so that the Auditor General's department can have an opportunity to respond to the issues that have been raised in the audit, and also for the Ministry of Finance and Public Service who commissioned the audit to also present the audit findings. As a committee, we can look at reports which are tabled in Parliament, and in the interest of transparency, I believe it's important that we also look at this report. So we will do so next week, Tuesday. All right, I'm advised by the committee clerk that the correct procedure would be the House would have to move a motion for the report to be referred to the committee, and then we can look at it. So I'll ensure that step is taken, and then we can examine the report after. Can we invite the Ministry of Labor and Social Security representatives, please? Oh, sorry, 1 second, the minutes, my apologies. The minutes were circulated, minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, March 30th. I'll just go page by page, and can you indicate if there are any corrections that you have identified? On page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, and page 7. Any corrections? If not, could I have a motion for the confirmation of the minutes? Member Henriquez? Oh, you weren't there, okay. Morris?
So moved, Chairman.
All right, moved by Member Guy, seconded by Member Henriquez. Any matters arising from the minutes?
Chairman, there's a matter on page 3 of the minutes, which I would need for the Ministry of Labor and Social Security when they arrive to answer, as it relates to the social work verification visit. PS had indicated that she would provide that information.
Is that paragraph 2 on the...
Paragraph 2.
Right.
And I also want to make a comment in light of some other matter related to it, Chairman.
You want to do it now, or you want to wait till the officials? When they arrive, okay. So you have a follow-up on the social workers verification visit, but we'll take that when the team comes in. Any other matter arising from the minutes? All right. Okay. Could invite in the team from the Ministry of Labor.
Chairman, while the team is coming in, I just want a little clarification and advice from the clerk as to whether that particular report that was tabled last week needed the authority of the House for the PAC to look at it. Based on standing orders, I'm looking at it, Public Accounts Committee. I don't know where that particular report fits, but under 2, it says all accounts and financial statements laid upon the table of the House in respect of statutory boards, public corporations, public companies, in which the government hold majority shares are deemed to be automatically referred to the Public Accounts Committee for examination and report. Now, that particular audit report done by the Ministry of Finance is an audit of the amounts, because of the amounts of funding as per the legislator granted to that body for public expenditure. And part 1 of the Public Accounts Committee, as per the standing orders, the PAC shall have the duty of examining A, accounts showing the appropriation of sums granted by the legislature to meet public expenditure, B, such other accounts as may refer to the committee by the House or under any law, and see the report of the Auditor General on such accounts. Now, I'd like to know where that particular accounts fall within the standing orders, so that we can have a better determination as to whether the House needs to send it to this Public Accounts Committee, or it is one of those that is automatically referred to the standing order, to the PAC.
Member Guy, the committee clerk says she will consult the legal officer just to ensure, and then get back to us on it. Okay. I had shared your broad interpretation because the Auditor General's department is a department of government. Madam Pierce, welcome. And could I invite you first to just introduce the team that is here, and then I'll also ask the Auditor General to introduce their team.
Okay. Morning, Chairman. You're hearing me, right? Yes. Morning, Chairman. Morning, members of the Auditor General's team, Ministry of Finance. With me today, I have Mr. Jason Anderson, to my right, Principal Financial Officer for the Ministry, Mrs. Audrey Dare-Williams, Chief Technical Director, Social Security, Mr. Dave McIntosh, Transitional Manager for the National Insurance Fund, Ms. Elsa Marks-Willis, Project Director for the PATH Program, Mr. Ludlow Bowie, Director Real Estate at the NIF, Mr. Owen Whiteley, Director Administration, and Mr. Lucian Smith, Acting Chief Internal Auditor for the Ministry. The Chief Internal Auditor is on vacation leave.
All right, thank you.
Morning, Chairman. Morning, PS and your team and the Ministry of Finance rep. For the record, I am Marlon McAdam, Deputy Auditor General, sitting in for the AG. And with me today are Caroline Lewis, Deputy Auditor General, Desland Mackenzie, Iselin Cooper, and Hyacinth Williams, all principal auditors.
Thank you. Ministry of Finance.
Morning, Chair, morning, members, Ministry of Labor. My name is Suzette Campbell from the Ministry of Finance and Public Service.
All right, thank you. Madam Pierce, in the...
Chair, one sec. I believe there is We have the Audit Committee for the Ministry of Labor and Social Security here, Audit Committee Chair.
Okay, and she wasn't introduced?
No, she wasn't.
Okay, could you just identify yourself, please?
Good morning, committee members and other persons. I'm Kate Bertram. I'm the Audit Committee Chair for the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, and I have Ms. Deborah Gardner, who is a representative of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, who sits on the Audit Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. All the public servants have been introduced and identified. Yes?
Chairman, can I get a clarification?
Yeah.
The chairman of the audit committee is are you employed to the Ministry of Labor and Social Security?
No, I'm not employed to the Ministry of Labor and Social Security.
But
I'm employed to the Jamaica Customs Agency.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay. All right, thank you. Madam Pierce, sorry, Member Clark, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are some members from this side that have sent in their apologies. Mrs. Holness.
No, we got it from Member Charles. Member Charles had, yeah, she had provided the apologies. Yes. Madam Pierce, there is a letter from you addressed to the committee clerk, which seeks to clarify the internal audit document for the NIF. Can I just ask you to provide some clarity, because we got one document and now we have received a second one.
Right. All right. Thank you, Chairman. And let me start out by apologizing to the committee. In February, thereabout, when the committee asked for the NIF audit of March 2018 that had been mentioned in a memo, to be quite honest, I was not exactly sure which document was, I wasn't sure the exact document that was referenced. And so I sought to get clarification from Mrs. Patrick Gardner because I wanted to ensure the accuracy of the document that I'd be providing to the committee. I spoke with the Chief Internal Auditor, who wasn't sure which March 2018 document was being referenced. However, by a series of deduction and consultation, I figured it must have been the audit that I had commissioned in 2017 on the NIF that was being referenced. Let me point out to the committee that I did ask the author of the memo to help me with the clarification, and that clarification was not forthcoming. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago, subsequent to submitting the document to the committee, I was advised by the author of the memo to me that the document that I submitted to the committee was not the correct document. So what I subsequently did was I then sent the committee the full document. What it would appear, Chairman, that the March 2018 document that was referenced in the memo was the quarterly report from the Chief Internal Auditor to the Audit Committee. And in that quarterly report also contained the NIF audit. So what I subsequently did was to submit the complete report to the audit, to the PAC. Let me emphatically apologize for the mix-up. It was in no way or in any intention to mislead the committee or to not provide full disclosure of information to the committee, but I did try to get clarification, and that clarification was not forthcoming until after I had submitted the report to the committee. So please, I'm asking to accept the apology. The committee will notice that the full report has in it elements of things that would have already been contained in the body of the body of reports that was previously presented.
Thank you, Madam Pierce. Just to indicate how we plan to proceed, we have before us a follow-up to some questions that were asked at the last meeting. Read the cash cards. Member Guy has a follow-up question from the minutes, and after we go through those, we'll then go to the NIF audit. But I'm going to ask Member Guy, who had indicated that he had a follow-up question, to go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chairman. P.S. At the last meeting, and I'm reading from the minutes here now, he said the committee would also like to know what other parameters would have prevented those persons from being added to PATH. Mrs. Roberts-Risden said she would provide that information. That was in respect of the social worker verification visits. Whilst this is a matter that has come up in the minutes, and there was a commitment to have the information provided, there was a commentary on one of the talk shows this morning about a bad experience at one of your offices in Western Jamaica. And the caller was telling the talk show host that they had applied for PASS some time ago, and they know of other persons who applied after them have gotten through, but all now they haven't seen anybody come to them. Having gone back to the office, and though he didn't say to the talk show host, but I suspect he said that he's going to call one of these programs, his commentary of the retort from your officers was saying, you can go call Mr. Clive Mullins if you want, because he's not working in ministry to determine what and what happens. Now, if that is true, if I'm assuming, say that is true, then that's an unfortunate commentary coming from one of your officers. And whereas that is one point, the other point is people who have applied after him, and if also that is also true, and have been put on the system, it speaks to a disparity in terms of how the whole program is done out there. And I know the challenges you have in the ministry in terms of numbers of social workers, but it is something that really is real out there. It is not only the fact that members of parliament come because they hear one or two anecdotal or even actual things about it, but the reality out there on the ground is that people are very concerned about the responses to PATH. I mean, I also got another WhatsApp from somebody said, boy, I'm in dire straits right now, and I've applied, and I've been told that it's not until July somebody can come to my house to look at things like that. So it speaks to a genuine concern that exists, that we have, of the situation that exists out there.
1 second, Pierce. Member Henriquez has a follow-up question.
Thank you, Chairman. Not to belay the point you're making, sir, but I have similar concerns constantly out there about PATH, with the people coming in saying that they're being turned down, they don't know why they're being turned down, they're given sometimes reasons that they don't understand. They have sometimes 4 or 5 children, they don't have a job. They get told that because they're renting a house or in a house with some family member that they have a toilet, so then don't need PATH. All sorts of stuff. I have to go and say, have you appealed? And they say, yes, they get a date or whatever, but they can't. But they go back, they have to go find money to go back down like a Maypen. And then they don't get no straight answer, and they get run around. And it's a consistent and constant theme within my constituency, where there's a great dissatisfaction with how PATH is being administered to people, and or either the information that they're being given as to why or why not. So I would really appreciate if we could deal with that situation.
All right, Member Charles, you also.
Good morning. I know that we probably should have moved on from PATH, but I also have a follow-up question for PATH. I noticed that between January the 1st and December 31st, 2020, there were 16,293 applications, right? 6,000.
Member Charles, could I just ask you to hold? I just want her to respond to the two queries raised by the members, and then we can go forward.
Thank you very much, Member. The committee will recall that some time ago I did make mention that, PATH, after being in operation for almost 20 years, we need to begin to revisit some of the rules and some of the operations surrounding PATH. I think what is becoming more and more evident is that there are concerns about the selection methodology for PATH. Now, PATH uses what we call a proxy means test. Proxy means it's not exact, it's used as a proxy to select or to identify who is poor. So what has happened is that prior to 2002, the selection methodology for inclusion on most of Jamaica's social programs was quite selective. And the programs were heavily criticized for including people who didn't deserve it. Because I like member childs, I'm going to put member childs, persons, who, she. And so it became very subjective. And so what then happened is that we moved towards a very objective selection methodology that removes a lot of the human element out of deciding who qualifies. Now, the methodology that we used was developed by the Planning Institute of Jamaica, and what it does is it looks at, it's not perfect, let me start out by saying there's no perfect method. So what it does is that it looks at factors that correlate with poverty, and for want of not getting too technical, but it looks at factors that correlate with poverty and then uses those factors based on the individual that presents themselves to try and identify who is poor or who isn't poor. We know it's not a foolproof method, and so because of that, we have developed what is called the appeals mechanism, where someone can appeal their non-selection. I think COVID has probably made it a little worse for us in terms of lots of persons losing their jobs, but it may be that the appeals process, we need to revisit it and sort of get it ramped up in terms of what is happening out there. Because I can't say definitively, I'm just saying it may be that process needs a bit of relook.
Yes, one second. Can I ask, what is the communication process to the person who is declined? Does the field officer say, you have been declined, no explanation, or is there an explanation provided to say you have been declined because you didn't meet this criteria, etc.?
Member, it is hard for the person to tell the individual why they have been declined, because it looks at the selection methodology looks at all the responses that you have given, and in the back end runs a algorithm that then determines poverty. So, however, at the point of application, though, the officer is able to tell the individual whether they have been provisionally selected, and those are the terms we use, provisionally selected, or they have not been selected for the program. Because provisionally selected now, after that, a social worker needs to go out and verify the information that the individual provided. All right?
Let me ask. So if you have, the assumption is if you have not heard, so when you make the application, if you are not provisionally selected, the assumption is you're not going to be.
The assumption is you are
But there would be no
Quite
communication to that person to say...
It would be right there. It would be
Or
right...
they tell them right there, then
right
and there,
there.
that you're not going to be selected? Because the
Right
examples
there.
we're hearing is that people don't hear anything and they don't get any response.
Right there, they're told.
Hold on.
In the office.
All right, I have member Henriquez, Charles, Sibley's, and Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm through. I understand what you're saying in general, and I'm not sure if it's maybe a communication issue or a misunderstanding, is that maybe some of the people that come in, they don't know what qualifies them specifically or disqualifies them specifically. So even though they get information that they might, and they go and look at the place or otherwise, if they don't know that if they're in a rented house or they're staying with a family member, that's going to cause them a problem, because when the office or the social worker goes, they say, well, what's wrong with where you are? And then they turn around and come back and say that's the explanation they get, that them not poor enough or whatever. So I don't know if you have a similar situation, but seems to be some difficulty in that whole process.
You see, member, I think what has happened over the years is that PATH has evolved to become the main social support program. But when PATH started, it was a program that was primarily focused on children. And that is why in the program design, some of you would know, there is a requirement that the children attend school and the babies are taken to the Well Baby Clinic, because it was a program primarily designed to focus on children. Why children? Because we know that the number one way out of poverty is through education. But over the years, what has happened is that we have ended up tinkering and tinkering and tinkering with the program, and it is now expected to be the program to help almost every and anybody who is in need. So I can sit here and I can tell you definitively that if you have a family that lives in poor living conditions, right? And they have lots of children, it's a big family, that they will qualify for PATH. If you have a family that it's a small family, living condition may not be so bad. By maybe your standards, it may be bad, but you know. But you know, they only have maybe one or two children. Chances are, it's all about probabilities. Chances are they may not qualify for PATH. May not qualify for PATH. And because of what we know about poverty, we know what correlates with poverty. We know that if you have a family that has lots of children, they live in rural Jamaica, or they live within, the inner city communities, they don't have certain household amenities. Chances are it's not foolproof, but chances are that family is a poor family that needs support. So, I think, as I said, we recognize that it's time for us to revisit it. It has become the main social program, and so we have we have strayed from the original core mandate of the program, and expect that PATH should become the program to assist everybody who is in need. It is for that reason, Chairman, that the program doesn't do very well at selecting elderly persons who are poor. And it is for that reason we have been pushing the introduction of a social pension program. And in another month or so, you will begin to hear the public education minister, Samuda, when he speaks next week, will lay a ministry paper in the House speaking to this new program. And it's for that reason we are introducing a social pension. Now, the social pension is not going to be a program that will be means tested. It is going to be a program that is targeting elderly above a certain age who don't have any regular income. They're not employed, because you do have some persons up there and they're employed. They're not receiving a pension, whether it be NIS. They're not getting any old age benefit from anywhere. They're not getting a pension from Canada or England or wherever. And for the mere fact that they're at that age and they don't have a steady stream of income, they will receive this support. So it's for that reason we are introducing the social pension. And there has been talk in the past about the introduction, for example, of an unemployment insurance program in Jamaica. I know that the Planning Institute of Jamaica and ourselves are going to be actively looking at something like that, because, the needs of the society differs. And I think PATH has been that program that persons expect to provide all the kind of support or to meet the needs of the different groupings out there, and it is not necessarily satisfying all the needs.
Chairman, I apologize. I know others want to speak. Just one quick thing. I just heard you say one thing that gave me a little concern. If a person or lady, man, whoever it is, have a lot of children versus a few children, it's really hard for me to look at a mother who has two and who can't manage and say you're likely to have a problem, but because she has 6, she's going to be okay and get help. I don't know what possibilities you have within your system or otherwise to maybe smooth out that type of a situation, because they still are in need. And I just wanted to say that, okay? And I applaud you for all the other things that we're trying to do to assist, and remind you also that there are certain areas in our country, especially in deep rural areas up in the hills there, that there is very little option even for a young lady or man to get good employment options. So they do need help, all right? Thank you. And Chairman, I know I've been long. Thank you.
No.
Doesn't mean that the person with 2 children won't qualify. It's just a probability.
No, this is an important discussion.
Chairman, sorry to cut you, but I believe that that is part of the problem, in that it's unsure. People are unsure. If I have children, whether 2, 3, 4, and I need help, because how do I know I'm going to fit into that getting help? And it's not a guesswork issue, and it's not, doesn't breed in people's minds the thought that maybe I'll get through and maybe they won't, because they don't understand why sometimes. But see my children, see their children, see where I live. I don't have a job. She don't have a job. How come her children get on and I can't get on? Right. And so that whole sort of scenario, I'm sure it's not what you would want it to be, and I'm sure you are working to end it, but it's prevalent and it's problematic, and I would appreciate if we could take a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Enriquez. And it's an important discussion for all of us, because I think every MP faces the feedback from the constituents, and as best as possible, the communication to the persons who are the applicants. And there was an offer at the last meeting, Member Enriquez, for us as legislators to understand the process better, so that we can also inform our constituents so that they are better aware. But Member Charles, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Madam PS, I had a question about the 2,444 that still in the application process. Are those persons considered the borderline ones that receive a score within 5 points of the eligibility score? Do those persons, are those ones that you have to go to and visit, like to see if they have a fridge? You know, that seems like it's a problem.
Okay. There's a table at the top of the next page. 545 would have been borderline.
So the pre-approved What happens with those pre-approved ones?
So the pre-approved would be those waiting for the social worker to visit and verify.
So the 244 are just pre-approved, waiting for a social worker to go and see if
the
what they
accuracy
say
of
is
the
correct.
information, right.
Okay. And these questions, sorry, Chair, these questions are all done in person?
Sorry, is that again?
The proxy means test, that's done one-on-one in person?
Yes.
Okay.
So there are a set of questions that are asked, and as the individual responds, the information is inputted in our MIS system, and at the end of the interview, an algorithm runs in the background, and the interviewer can tell the person that they're provisionally selected or they have not been selected. And if they're borderline, they're referred to the appeals process.
So, P.S., what we want to know is if someone has a refrigerator or a microwave, because that's what I hear a lot, are they disqualified? Yes. Tell the truth, because...
No.
You're sure, P.S.?
I am sure.
Okay.
It's an issue, P.S., which has come up over and over again.
Yeah.
I used to hear the thing about flush toilets as well. I don't know if, obviously it's not told to the applicants, but people leave with that view that that is the reason why they don't get selected. Because if they look in the house and them see these things, and quite frankly, I mean, having those kinds of things are basic necessities, which are no indicators of poverty. Somebody could send some money from abroad and you chomp up and buy a fridge. You have to have a fridge, you have to have a stove. Those things are basic. But that view is a view that exists out there, PS.
To the extent, Chair, if I may.
And Chairman, sometimes it's a gift from a family member who, got a farm work card or something, and they're still suffering. So it's unfair if that's a part of it.
Hold
and
on.
a TV too.
Member Sibley's been holding. Yes, Member Sibley's.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, PS. My question, PS, is based on all the queries with regards to the PATH program, would you say the means testing has failed us?
I could not say that, because I can only go by data and analysis. So the data prior to the use of the means test showed that somewhere in the region, and I'm trying to remember now from 2001, so forgive me, but somewhere in the region of less than 40% of those who were on the previous programs that were amalgamated were truly poor based on the survey of living conditions. The latest data we have is 2017. Is 70% of those who are on the PATH program, and this is 2021 data? 2020 data, sorry. This is 2020 data, which says that 70% of those who are on the PATH program fall in quintile 1 and 2, which says that we are doing comparatively better than the previous programs. Is it perfect? It is not perfect.
Let me ask you this way, PS, because I'm interpreting what you have said, that based on those persons who are in the program, they would have been 70% of those persons are persons that ought to be in the program. But as you would have heard from all the MPs here and on previous sittings, we are talking about those that have not made it in the program. And even a few minutes ago, the discussions were with regards to children, 6 children, and the algorithm would disqualify an individual. And when asked, is the person who is disqualified, who members here is of the view are in need of assistance, is it explained to them? And the answer was no, it would not have been explained to them because the algorithm is an algorithm system. So to my mind, any system that deals with the social welfare of a country that doesn't explain to individuals why is it that they would be accepted or rejected, if it doesn't explain it, if nobody can assist those individuals, then to my mind, something is seriously wrong. Something is also seriously wrong. It's 70% in the system ought to be in the system. I was expecting to hear that 90% of those who are in the system ought to be in the system. It means, therefore, I can infer then that 30% of those who are probably in the system ought not to be in the system. P.S. Some weeks ago, when we had a sit-in, we discussed this PATH program, and we were requesting that it be reviewed. Has there been any step to review, to audit, as it were, per se? Not the usual audit, but audit the system as to its effectiveness and what can be done to improve it, or whether or not what is being used need to be dumped and we recreate something that can efficiently and adequately attend to the needs of the poor Jamaicans that are out there crying out that the PATH system doesn't work.
Well, member, as I had mentioned previously, that we are reviewing the program. You are making mention, if I understand you clearly now, about the selection methodology for the program. I think what we will need to do is to engage the Planning Institute of Jamaica to see how or what probably needs to be done in terms of the selection methodology. Chairman, you mentioned earlier, I had committed to having a special session with the members of Parliament. I want to assure you that we did communicate with the House leader, and we're trying to find a date in terms of having that session with the members of Parliament to walk you through in detail the program, the PATH program, and the other programs of the ministry, so that the members can better understand. And, you know, Chairman, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking that that may be a very good time for maybe to involve the Planning Institute of Jamaica and for them to hear firsthand from the MPs some of the challenges that you're having, so that in reviewing the selection methodology, to see how some of your concerns can be factored into the revised or methodology to come.
All right, thank you. I have a couple of members who've been waiting. Hold on, Member Wilson. I have Member Clark, I have Member Williams, I have Member Miller who've been waiting. So go ahead, Member Clark.
Mr. Chairman, I listened to PS a while ago, and I yearn for that meeting, and therefore the concerns that I have now, I really would hold back until then when we will be sitting in a smaller group and we can just hash it out properly.
Yeah.
Member Williams.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I join Member Clark in that regard because I was about to say that I welcome the decision to review after, 20 years? To
Almost
review
20
the
years,
program.
19 years.
And I join with you, Madam PS, in calling for that review. I think it is very timely, given the discussions and the questions being raised here by members of the committee, including myself. But I would propose, and I think you touched on it, that the specific actions or items or input required, or data, I would say, required for the algorithm, that to some extent, if those items or data could be reviewed so that it makes it, I would say, a little more relaxed or less strict, so that the net is widened. And I say that in that I think from this committee meeting and the reviews that we have had, it was borne out that there is funding. We have a lot of funds sitting in bank accounts, and we have thousands of persons who did not access the grant. And so we do, in my view, should have the budgetary capacity. So a relaxing of the algorithm or the strict, specific actions required for the algorithms. I think that's where the problem lies, in my view, if it is relaxed upon the review, so that the issues raised by my colleague, MP Enriquez, in relation to those who qualified and the whole issue of eligibility could somehow be addressed. That's just my input, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Member, I think we should make a commitment maybe in the next, we are in April, before the end of May, we can use the Zoom platform for us to ensure we have this meeting for the MPs. And I would also say it may not be the same occasion, but we should also extend it to councillors as well, because they also have direct interface with many other applicants. Member Miller, then Member Wilson.
Thank you, Sir Chair. I would like to ask a few questions. What's the total amount of persons that are currently on the PATH program? 2, what is the threshold that the PATH program can hold in terms of its capacity? And 3, we have been hearing the talk about the review of the PATH program. Can you give me a timeline, PS, as to when we're going to start this review and when we're going to implement changes to this new PATH program?
All right. Well, member, you've put me on the spot here about when we're going to complete and when we're going to start implementing, because you know that with any review of a program like that, there is a process, and the decision doesn't rest with the ministry alone. But suffice it to say that we have started the review. We have a draft document which we are to discuss with the minister and then take it further. You asked a question in terms of the number of persons who are currently on the program. Now, the number of individuals who families are receiving payment for amounts to approximately 335,000 individuals. All right? Now that, notice I said the individuals who are being paid a benefit, right? That represents 130,000? 130,000 families. So I'm going to walk you through a series of numbers. So we have 130,000, and these are approximate figures, right? So please don't hold me exact to it. we have approximately 130,000 families who are in receipt of PATH payment. Every other month when we make payments, we're sending out 130,000 payments, all right? From those 130,000 families, you have 335,000 individuals within those families who, based on the benefit, based on the composition of the family, the family is getting a payment for them. What do I mean? So, remember I said earlier that PATH focuses on children, primarily, in the inception. So if you have children who are in school or not in school, like babies, the family gets a benefit for that child. If you have someone who has a disability, they get a benefit for that person. You have an elderly person, they get a benefit. So you may have a or pregnant and lactating. So you may have a family, for example, that's comprised of 10 persons, 5 children, an elderly person, somebody with a disability. That's 7. But you have 3 other persons in the family who are adults. PATH doesn't provide a benefit to the adults in the family. You understand? So we have 130,000 families, 335,000 individuals, but if I were to include those adults in the family now, who are in the family, but we are not providing a benefit to the family, so they're indirect beneficiaries, we have something in the region of a little over 600,000 persons, right? But when we report, we report on the number of individuals who were paying or the number of families who are paying. We don't generally report on the adults in the family. Now, the adults in the family, some of you may have heard about the Steps to Work program and other programs within the ministry that we try to channel the individuals to, employment type generating programs that we try to, channel the family to. So.
Follow, Member Miller.
No, still have not heard. All right, you said 335,000 individuals, approximately.
Mm-hmm.
Is this 60% of the capacity of PATH? Is it 70%?
Sorry, I didn't tell you the
Is
total.
this 80%?
Sorry. It is the capacity of PATH is 360,000 persons in terms of payees, individuals. I don't have my calculator. So 335 over 360 is how much?
I'm inferring from your question, once you get to the threshold of 360, you can't take on anybody else. So if there are applicants, you would have to find a way to indicate that they're not eligible.
However, Chairman, PATH is, people come on and people come off. So we have never been in a situation where we have reached that 360. All right? No. Because every year when the school year, 5th form or 6th form ends and people exit school, individuals come off the program. So we have never been able to reach that 360,000 individuals that we're paying, because people come on, people go off.
In spite of the fact that we have so many who are being denied or don't qualify. Because I think that is the concern of the members here, which is that
Sir Chair.
It's a little surprising that you're not at the capacity, but there are so many who can't seem to make it onto the list for various different reasons.
And being denied when the need is there.
Chairman. It's not a capacity
It is not the issue.
It's not a capacity issue.
Okay, so again, I think it's important when we have this session to look at the criteria of eligibility Because I must tell you, I had a view that once you got to a particular number, you couldn't take any more, so you had to find a reason to tell people no. And I think that's how this thing about fridge and stove or whatever. But if that's not the issue, I think the public education for us in the first instance and for those who are potential beneficiaries is absolutely necessary so that people know the basis on which they can apply and what they need to have to apply. But that is important information. Okay, I didn't know that. All right, I have a number of members holding, including Member Wilson, who's been holding for a long time. Member Wilson, on this, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome, Ms. Drisden. I have a few questions. You mentioned from the offset that PATH was designed specifically for children. I wanted to clarify whether we have programs designed for persons who are vulnerable and who may not have children, because I do have quite a number of those within my constituency. So that is the first question, and then I'll just hammer through each as I go along. So that's the first one.
Yes, we do. And I did mention, for example, the Steps to Work program, or we have our electronic labor exchange, where what we try to do is to work with the individual to get them into some form of employment, whether it be they become their own micro-entrepreneur, or we help them to go back to school, whether it be HEART and other training opportunities, and so forth. So we do have those other type programs within the ministry. They may not be as large enough, and because of maybe their social worker deficit, maybe our reach is not as big, but there are other programs targeting those persons.
Because the reason I ask, the most popular one for me, and you have to forgive, I'm a new MP, is PATH. I have never heard of the Step to Work, more than you mention it here now. So hopefully when we have that briefing, you could let us know similarly the capacity and how we can allow our constituents to access this program. The other question I have is relating to, it touches a bit on what everyone is discussing, relating to communication. Most of the persons who come to my constituency office on the days that I'm there, no information is given as to why they are not on the program or off the program. George just said, they just tell me quite frank, MP, they came, they did their assessment and I don't hear anything. This is 2 years now. This is a year and a half now. So you did mention earlier that the officers would communicate to the applicants, but I beg to say that in some of these cases, this is not what's happening out there in the field. So do you have any formal communication that you will send to the applicants?
Remember, I'm told that because the individual is sitting there, there is no, other than explaining to the person at the point of application, there is no communication that goes out after in writing, because they're told right there and then on application.
Yeah. Well, hopefully when you're doing the review, that can be revisited as well, just for veracity. That communication actually occurs. And then I have another question which follows up from Member Miller, and it comes from just Thursday. I had a person who came by the office seeking a tablet. One of their children is on PATH, but the other is not. And I asked why, because both of them are in the same house. They live in the same situation. So are you aware of scenarios where you have a parent with 2 kids, one is on PATH and one isn't? Because I have that scenario right now. And they live in the same context, and they even went further and said, Mr. Wilson, the 2 of them in the same issue.
It ought not to happen, member, because at the point of applying for PATH, the individual who is doing the application is asked to provide the names of all the persons living in the household, name, basic biodata information. The only reason that that family, I can think, and I don't know the specific case, but I'm just theorizing. The only reason that that family, because I'm going to assume that the mother did give the child's name, the only reason that the child may not, the family may not be getting a benefit for the child is maybe she did not produce the birth certificate for the child to prove that the child actually is her child and, you know, she's responsible for the child's care. So it may have been that there is some missing information in the application, and so the family gets the benefit, but the child is not. So there's that scenario. There's also the scenario where once the child becomes of school age, right? So let's say it was a baby that was on the program, then the child now turns 6 and is to be going to school. The family has an obligation to come into us and provide us with the school information, the school the child is now attending. Now, there is a bit of a grace period where the family has to come in. After that grace period, where the family does not come in to tell us, hey, Mary Brown is now attending, I don't know, halfway through primary school, right? At some point in time after the family that was getting paid for that child's payment may now be reduced. It doesn't stop, it would be reduced from the full amount to a partial amount. Now, every August, we do have a public education campaign that we run automatic, where we tell families that they need to come in and tell us their child's new school information, because there are various points in the school where people change, right? They change when they go to primary school, they change when they go to high school. We also tell them, if while attending school, you change school you attend, you also need to let us know. So the child may be going to halfway through primary, the family moves to St. Catherine, they're now going to St. Catherine Primary, right? When we are communicating with halfway through primary about Mary Brown, at some point in time, halfway through primary is going to say to us, we don't have a Mary Brown attending the school, right? But we don't know that Mary Brown is now attending St. Catherine High, or St. Catherine Primary, rather. The family has a responsibility to come in. So it is in those scenarios, those are the only scenarios I can think, that a family that may have been getting paid, receiving a benefit for the child, and that benefit may stop. Or be reduced, I should say.
All right, thank you. I'm going to follow up with that particular parent and ask her to go back to the PAT office based on information that you have just given. The other question...
member, you can also send it to us just to prove your thing, where you can also find out for yourself.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Because we do get a lot of requests for information about PAT, in particular in the rural communities. This is following from Member Miller's question. I wanted to know if we can have a list of persons who are on the PAT program in my constituency. That is particularly important for me based on how I administer the constituency. Persons come and they will be on the PAT program and they'll ask for stuff that PAT is already providing. So for a member of parliament, is it possible for us to get a population listing of this 300,000, not for the entire country, but for your constituency specifically? Is it possible to get that information from your office?
I would interject. I think it may raise some privacy issues for the individuals who are involved, and I think certainly just thinking of the Data Protection Act, you would need the permission of the what you call the data subjects to provide that information. I understand where Member Wilson is coming from. I fully understand. But I think that's something that would require some greater thought before we move there. But I can already see a problem arising where the data subject will say, I don't want my information shared with anybody. When I made my application, it was for this specific purpose. If it is going to be used for something else, my permission explicitly would be needed to do so. And that is part, I know, of the data protection law now.
But we could always, Chair, we could always include that in the review in terms of going forward. In terms of how
it's something I'm a little cautious about it, even though I understand why because we know that people come to us all the time. They may be on one program and they still want assistance on another, but it's something that I'm a little cautious about because it could also open up itself to some abuse if it gets in the wrong hands. And it's very personal information that persons may have, which they may not want shared with others. But let me go to member. Oh, you have one more question?
Yeah, so the last question is pertaining to the review process that PATH is currently undertaking. Do we have a timeline for its completion? That's the last question.
No. No, we don't have a specific timeline that I can communicate with you, no.
All right, Member Hero, then Member Guy. Member Hero.
Chairman, I mean, what we could do for the member is if he has a list that he may want us to check, which would be a yes, no, if somebody is on. I don't know if the committee would think that there's a problem with that, but, you know, you would not agree to that? Meaning, if you had 10 names that you say, well, can you please check if these are receiving PATH, it could be a yes or no. Okay, all right. Okay, well, I stand corrected, or I stand to be guided.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did retreat somewhat to say that I would wait until the meeting that you would make sure bring about. But the more that we go further into this matter, Mr. Chairman, it begs me to say something more. The fact of the matter, Mr. Chairman, as I see it in my opinion, it's a case of not having a collaborative effort amongst the agent or the agents of the state, in the sense that there is a guidance council department in every school, which I am quite aware of, working in tandem with the Ministry of Social Security and Labor, as the case is, to make sure that the program that is in place works and works in an excellent way. Because as Madam Pierce is telling us, she is giving us what is on paper, the theory of it, but the practicality of it is not out there on the ground. For example, you did mention the fact that, yes, the student may be going to halfway tree primary but move to St. Catherine for whatever reason. Now we should have a system in place that tracks that situation and make it known long before, because we are dealing with the poor and destitute. And so they might have moved to St. Catherine for want of comfort, as the case is. And therefore, to come back to Kingston poses a problem where the same finance that they want from PATH is what they don't have to come back to Kingston to give you the information. And therefore, I am saying, and this is why I am advocating for that meeting, Mr. Chairman, so that we really can look at the situation and bring about solution, because next year this time, if we don't have that meeting, we are still going to come back here and we'll be discussing the same matter over and over without having a solution to the situation. Because what we find, and I find what Member Wilson said earlier about one child is on PATH and the next is not on PATH for various reasons. The mother is unable to send both children to school because the finance is just not there. The officers that goes out, they are supposed to collect and tabulate all of this information. But we don't have a check and balance. Once you get on PATH, you're on PATH until God knows what, and the parent will tell you that boy ain't just drop off a party now and get the lunch again and whatever the case is. Once you're not accepted on part, then that's it. It goes. And 90% of the time, the elected representative, whether it be the councillor or the MP, is the one that gets all the bawling, all the complaints, but we are unable to move further because you don't have a standard set situation that can make the thing work. And so, Mr. Chairman, I beg of you that we seek to bring about that meeting, that when we leave that meeting, we will be of the knowledge that, yes, this is a set piece of paper that I can photocopy and give to each parent and say, once you don't have this, don't bother even go apply. Once you have it, then you're good to go. But that is where I think we need to go, Mr. Chairman.
And I'm committed, again, once the ministry can arrange it. I would like to do it before we have sectoral debates now, but maybe before the end of May, we should look at doing it. It's not something that should drag on too long.
Mr. Chairman, we don't have to wait on a regular committee meeting. We could use a Thursday morning or something to make it work.
No, I agree. It doesn't have to be, because we want all members to participate. So it doesn't have to be a meeting of this committee to do it, because every MP would want to be a part of it. So I'm committed to following up to ensure we get it done as soon as possible. Member Guy?
Chairman, it's just a recommendation based on something the Permanent Secretary said earlier on, as it relates to transition from one school to the other. And the child gets lost in the process in terms of not getting the benefit. Am I understanding clear? That's what you said when the comment was made, that sometimes when a child
I wouldn't use the term lost in the process, but transition from one school to the next, and we have not gotten that information.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't you, and it's a recommendation I'm putting on the table now, have a sort of arrangement, a database sharing with the Ministry of Education? Because all children who are registered in schools the Ministry of Education would have that data of those students who are there. They would have the date of birth of those students. And it would be a simple thing to have some sort of cross-reference with the Ministry of Education. In the process, I mean, we're looking at suggestions now that will make the things move faster, move seamlessly without any hindrances and without any of the persons who really need the benefits suffering as a consequence of any issues. Just a suggestion, something could be explored.
Member, it is an excellent suggestion. I think that you are making a very good plug for why we need to be able to uniquely identify everybody who lives in Jamaica. We have had, because we have databases that deal with so many people, you will find several Mary Browns, and the issue is how to uniquely identify them. So there is no unique identifier.
NIDS, Mr. Chairman. NIDS.
We need that NIDS ID.
Right, sir, Chair?
You hear me? I said NIDS. The PS was asking how can we identify.
Do you want me to respond?
NIDS. Sorry?
Because we could have had a NIDS from at least 2 or 3 years ago, if there was collaboration and cooperation.
Let us have it,
if you want me to respond.
Let us have it now.
All right.
Right, sir, Chair?
But remember, it is something that we have tried before, but outside of having something that uniquely identifies all the children, it is difficult. I give you an example of what used to happen with PATH when we didn't stick out for the birth certificates. The grandmother would come and apply for PATH and bring the pink paper, you know, that pink paper that you get when the child just born, and you have the same name child, and the grandmother who occasionally looks after the children. As we know, in many communities, you have the grandmother, and then you have the mother who comes and applies for PATH with the same children, right? And then so this is another reason why you may also have persons who tell you they have children and they're not on PATH, because that child may already be or another family may already be receiving payment for that child because they said that they're responsible for that child. So the issue of identifying duplicates, right, can be a challenge for us. And so it is one of the reasons, because we don't want the Auditor General to come and tell us that we're paying duplicate payments, so many persons. And it is for that reason we now stick out for birth certificates for all the children who are applying for PATH, right? So, you know, unfortunately, sometimes because people try to beat the system, you know, we have to be more rigorous in some of the requirements.
All right, thank you, PS. Let me just ask members, are there any more questions on PATH? Because I want to close off on PATH and move to the NIF audit report. All right, Mrs. Patrick Gardner, you had asked for an opportunity to respond to something said earlier. Could you go ahead, Mrs. Gardner?
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, members, colleagues. I would just like to clarify that what was said earlier by the Permanent Secretary outlined as the steps in terms of getting the clarification of the document bore no resemblance to the communication that was sent to me on the matter. I reiterate and emphasize that I received no request for clarification. What was received from the PS was a request for the report referenced in my memorandum as if it was never sent. I responded to the Permanent Secretary that the document was in fact attached to my report and that she had it, that it was attached to my memorandum and that she had it. I had a stamp, as you would recognize. The memo is stamped by the Secretary in her office. I did not see what was submitted to the PAC. It was not shared with me, Mr. Chairman. I received a copy of the document from the House on my request because I wanted to ensure that it was the same document that I had attached to my memorandum. Having received the document, I noticed that it was not the entire document that I had submitted. It was just a part of the document. So I thought that should have been clarified for the record. And I advised the clerk that it was not the correct document. And I advised also the clerk of the House that it was, the acting clerk of the House, that it was not the right document. I was told that the document, as was sent from the Permanent Secretary, had to be sent to the committee and that it could only be changed by the Permanent Secretary. I had written to the Permanent Secretary by that time advising her that the document was in fact not the document that I had sent, and I had attached the document that I had sent. Those were the series of events. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I don't want to go back and forth, but I had the first document which we got, and then I now have the second one. And just correct me if I'm wrong. Everything in the first document related to the NA of Resort Management Company audit is in the second document. Is that correct? Because I've looked through. What is in the second document, it has other related things, including other audit-related matters. But I just want to ensure, because some members may have read the first one and taken notes from the first, everything in relation to this is also in the second. Is that correct? Just for my, but what was not included would be, for example, it has some internal audit objectives, scope, summary of findings, and some observations, management responses, etc. Can you just clarify that, PS, so we just know what the two documents are? I don't want to go back and forth in terms of the correspondence, but just so we know what the documents are.
Right. Yes, Chairman. It is my understanding, looking at the document, that the NIF audit was that the document subsequently sent, the second document, is the quarterly report for the internal audit unit that they submit to the internal audit committee. And so it would have in it a compendium of audits. So one of the documents in it was in fact the NIF audit. I don't need to belabor the point, but the memo that was the substance of the discussion that prompted this request, the memo made reference to the NIF audit. And so it is for that reason that that report was in fact shared with the committee, having tried to get clarification and was not sure on the 22nd of February.
All right, thank you. All right, we're going to now move to the NIF Resort Management Company audit. Members, the members have any questions on this? Yes, Member Sibley.
Thank you again, Chair. PS, I know there is no, in this report, I don't know where I have missed it, but is there any management response to the report that you submitted, the report of Internal Audit Quarterly Report, March 2018, Ministry of Labor and Social Security? Is there any management responses with regards to the various points in this report?
Yes, there would have been in the second report that was sent, there would have been at the back of it, right, this one, at the back of it, some pages with management responses. Now, committee, I would like it to be clear that that this was not an audit that was on the ministry's internal audit plan, and this was an audit specifically that I had requested to be done by the internal auditors of the ministry.
You speak to a second report that management response is attached. Yes. When that management response was done, PS?
This would have been done on the date November 2017. You don't have it at the back of the second report?
Yes, at the back. I think it starts procurement of consultants and other suppliers. The last page 57 onwards. Members, the last 3 pages at the back. Yeah.
Okay. That's my procurement consultants and other suppliers?
Yes.
It starts on page 57 with a memorandum from Audrey Dear-Williams, the Chief Technical Director, addressed to the PS, dated November 10, 2017, and it gives a response on the various items that were raised in the report.
Okay, so this is... Okay, therefore my next question, PS, having received this response, what, if anything, was done by your office with regards to this audit?
All right. So, member, having received the report, a number of things were done. First of all, let me, the structure and setup at the NIF is quite, should I explain it? No. It is quite difficult to understand. The NIF is not a body corporate. It does not have its own independent legal status. However, over the years, the National Insurance Fund has been treated like it's a body corporate. If I were to go back to the NIS Act speaks to, in fact, two ministers. One minister that has responsibility for the scheme, and one minister, which is the minister with responsibility for Social Security, and the Minister of Finance having responsibility for the fund. The NIF budget comes under the public body's budget to Parliament each year, yet still it is not a body corporate. It is actually a department of the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. So it is not a body corporate, but over the years it has been treated like a body corporate. And member, in my humble opinion, that in and of itself creates a number of challenges, which I believe the audit pointed to in terms of a number of weaknesses. They have an advisory board. Now I'm going to ask members to please try and follow me carefully. They have an advisory board whose primary mandate is to help to oversee investment decisions and help to guide investment decisions that are made. Yet still, by the very investment policy that they're guided by, it's an advisory board, yet still, by the very investment policy that they're guided by, an investment policy that is approved by the Ministry of Finance, the board has authority to approve up to certain limits investment decisions. I hope you're following me in terms of some of the conundrum.
Go ahead.
Is what I would,
Go ahead,
would
PS.
say.
We are following.
You're following me?
Following.
Okay, good. So then you have this department of the ministry that is not a body corporate, but at the same time, because it's an investment, they deal with investment for national insurance contributions. They have, over the years, established a number of purpose vehicle companies. And we understand that sometimes you have a certain type of investment. For you to hold that investment, or depending on the nature of the investment, you have a company. So you have a department, not a body corporate, but they have subsidiary companies. Okay? Wow, that's a...
Just an interjection. When you say subsidiary company, who are the holders of the shares, those shares that you said? You mentioned company. And you say subsidiary companies, therefore they are shares. Ooh, wait.
The shares are held in the name of Accountant General.
Accountant General. So.
And if it is a land asset.
Wait a minute, Chair. PS. Wait a minute. I just want the clarification because it would therefore not be accurate based on the formality of it, to say that it is a subsidiary of the department. And that is why I asked, who are the holders of the shares? But are you saying, therefore, that these companies, the advisory board, give oversight to? That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Continue, please.
Yes. So in these companies, the shares are held in the Accountant General, and if it's a land asset, it is the Commissioner of Lands, right? but the shares are held in trust on behalf of the National Insurance Scheme. Right? Okay, you're an accountant?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so maybe you understand. It took me a while to understand and figure it out. I'm not an accountant. Right? And I believe, members, that arrangement and the kind of latitude and many things had become custom and practice in terms of how they function. So in 2017, I had a little bit of concern with how things were operating there. And to be quite honest, I will tell the House that because of the relationship between the NIF, the Ministry of Finance, the Minister of Finance, this sort of treatment almost like a body corporate, but is really not a body corporate. They have an advisory board. To be quite honest, I did not get involved in their day-to-day operations. However, in 2017, I asked the auditor, the chief internal auditor, I asked her to do a special audit focusing on payments, and that is the substance of the report that you have before
you. Are you clearer with regards to the role, your role as permanent secretary, as it relates to the advisory board and the NIF?
Member Sibley's, that's a good question. As accounting officer, I do recognize that ultimately many of the decisions that are taken there, that this Parliament, based on their structure, there is an expectation that I will come to the Parliament and give an account for what happens there. However, based on their construct and how decisions are taken and how things had functioned prior, I would say that I was not necessarily the most comfortable. I believe that since the audit, a number of changes that the audit allowed me to see what was happening there. And the changes that have taken place in terms of adjusting how they function there, I think I'm a little clearer now, Member Sibley's.
And back to my original question, having been clearer and having commissioned the audit and received the audit, seeing the findings, what have you done since you have received the audit? I just want to know these things before I go into the various findings that I have read in the report.
Okay. Well, many of the things in the report that were not in keeping with government best practice, those were addressed and stopped. For example, and I'm looking for my notes here, forgive me. So, for example, because the NIF was now the the department that was now dealing with the subsidiaries, sometimes lines became blurred in terms of responsibility and so forth. So working with the board at the time, we tried to create a separation in function. So for example, if I were to go back to the BRCA audit, the management agreement that was signed in 2014 pointed to the head of the NIF being the owner's representative. But the owner's representative was now the managing director for the company, and that person is a civil servant who is supposed to be reporting to me, right? So what we did, for example, at that time, we hired a consultant who was now the person who was a representative of the owner's representative to interface directly with the management at the hotel, thereby sort of creating some amount of separation. Also, the board for the resort company.
When was that person?
Hired?
Yes, the consultant representing
the owner. That person was hired in 2018.
You say when in 2018, was it the first half of the year?
First half of the year was somewhere about, I think it was February or March. It was early in the year. Yeah. All right. Another major thing that we did was also the board for the resort management company was now a separate board from the advisory board, because the resort management company is a company that was now charged with the responsibility of overseeing the management of this hotel, the investment, the hotel.
For clarification, you said a board was set up to manage the hotel?
To oversee.
To oversee the hotel.
Right, the
there
management.
was no board. There was no board before.
There were boards before, but the board was drawn from the advisory board.
And I'm trying to understand
right.
the corporate governance chair.
Well, it took me a while to figure it out. You have a NIF board, which manages all the NIF investments. You have a NIF resort management company, which was specific to BRCA
right.
thing. And then you have a NIF advisory board.
No.
Well, tell me about the advisory board.
So you have a NIF advisory board.
Right.
Right.
That's what I said, yeah.
Well, you mentioned 3 boards, Chairman.
No, you have the NIF main board, you have the NIF resort management company board,
right.
And then you have the NIF advisory board.
No.
Oh, no?
The NIF main board and the advisory board is the same board.
Oh, it's the same board?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And so the functions of the advisory board in this case had to do with oversight for the hotel's operations?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right, well, just help me then, sorry.
May I assist your chair? So I'm going to see if I understand, if we understand what you have outlined. You have the advisory board, the NIF advisory board.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to the separate board being set up independently of the advisory board, you used to have members of the advisory board that used to sit as the board for the hotel. That's what you, that.
Right.
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 So they would be properly, they would have been properly, this is a question, no, so listen to me. They would have been properly appointed, these members of the advisory board that are, that was appointed by the advisory board, the subset. They were properly appointed through the company structure.
Through the company structure in terms of their names going on the company document. Yes, in that respect, yes.
Okay.
However, member, for government boards of management go to the cabinet for appointment. So when I said that it changed, we created distancing, right? A separation where now the board for the hotel was now appointed by cabinet, and then whatever company documents that need to be adjusted, of course, would be adjusted. And the chairman for the advisory board was no longer the chairman for the resort board, which is the board for the hotel. So that's what when I said created some amount of separation.
There's a clarification question that arises out of what you have said about it is cabinet that appoints the board. So the board previously that were a subset
of the
members from the advisory board, they weren't appointed by cabinet?
No.
Okay, thank you.
So
Member
who
Guy.
appointed that
Continue.
board?
Member
How was
Guy has
that
a
board
question.
appointed? How was that board appointed, NPS? If it was not, if the answer to Member Sibley's question is in the negative, how was that NIF main
Resort?
board appointed?
So the main board, in terms of the advisory board, was appointed by cabinet, but the board of the subsidiaries, which Member Sibley's would say,
the board of
they were not appointed by
company.
cabinet. The boards of the companies were not appointed by
RPS.
cabinet, but the
Yes.
advisory board was appointed by
All right.
cabinet.
The advisory board, as you corrected the chairman earlier, and the main board of the NIF
Is the same.
are the same.
Yes.
One and the same. So basically, the board that was operating prior to the official appointment of the NIF advisory board, the NIF resort board, which was formed specifically for Malaya, okay, that almost operated like a subcommittee of the main board, because the members who comprised that particular committee were officially appointed as members of the main NIF board, right? That's what we're getting.
I don't know, member, if...
No. As to the structure of it is another matter, but those members were culled from that main board. Isn't that so?
Yes, they were called from the main board.
So, in essence, it's a subcommittee of the board, then, which the chairman of the main board headed as well. And you're saying that subsequent to that, now, formalization was given so that resort board was distanced from the main board, and that was appointed by cabinet to operate as an independent body, not reporting to the main board, but having report to the minister with responsibility for that area, as all boards do. And then, would members of that new board be part of the
main board?
Main
yes.
board as well?
Yes, but not alone.
Yes, I
So
understand.
you would have maybe 2 or 3 persons
Okay.
from the advisory board sitting on the
All right, fine.
resort board.
Clear
yes.
is in my mind what is.
You could continue to explain the structure, because it's
important.
very important that we understand the structure in order to really understand the findings in the report.
Right. So, so that was the structure, and so because in my opinion, member, there wasn't this clear separation in terms of roles and function, decision making. I would say, practices emerged over time that were not necessarily best practice when it comes on to governance. So the question was what we have done. So I was explaining that I wrote to the board chair for NIF to discuss, to outline to him how funds, how decisions should be made when it comes on to the resort company and the NIF, for example. Trying to separate how decisions are made, and you can then, it can be clear. So, for example, the hotel may need, I don't know, they need something. They need money, for example, to operate because they're not making any money or they're losing and they have staff to pay and they need money. It can't be that the NIF is just simply transferring monies to the resort company. The resort company, as a board, needs to look at what is happening at the hotel, analyze it, and then make a formal request to the main board to say, hey, we have problems here, or the hotel needs this, or they need that, and we need some propping up. Because that board would have analyzed what is happening at the hotel, come up with a recommendation that then goes to the main board for a decision. And of course, depending on what it is that is required, a decision may be taken, or it may have to be elevated further up the chain.
1 minute for clarity. When you say main board, you're talking about the advisory board.
I'm sorry, I use the advisory board and the main board interchangeably. I'm sorry.
So you're saying the board of the hotel, which would prepare a request, or ought to have prepared a request?
No, that was since the change with
since 2018, you say?
Yes.
Is it 2018?
Yes, that would have been beginning since I wrote that memo to the chairman in January of 2019. But we would have started operating like that maybe some months prior. But I formalized it in writing to the chairman.
Okay. Continue.
Yeah.
1 second. Member Miller, you had a follow-up on this?
I'd just like to ask some questions, if I may, PS. That what would have sparked your interest to conduct an internal audit? 2, in your worldview, would you say that you have identified some irregularities at the NIF? And finally, was there some operations taking place there that you personally as a PS was uncomfortable with?
Member, I was concerned about what was happening at the hotel because by this time I was becoming a little more aware of what was taking place there. And I realized that the hotel was not doing as well as it should. However, if I must go back to what sparked my interest was the fact that in January of 2017, I think it was January or February of 2017, I was invited to a groundbreaking ceremony for the construction of something at the property. And I became concerned because I had not seen, while I knew about there was general talk for need for this particular facility, I had not seen any procurement that had been done. And if you know how government normally operates, procurement above a certain threshold, you have different thresholds and so forth. And I was concerned that I was invited to a groundbreaking event and had not seen any procurement that had taken place. And with that, it sort of sparked my interest in trying to figure out this relationship. And as I said before, to be quite honest, recognizing that they have an advisory board, there is a structure and thing, I was not concerned in terms of the day-to-day operations with what was happening at the NIF, because I thought that, with an advisory board and all of this oversight, I don't need to worry about what was happening there.
All right, going back to Member Sibley's. You want to go to your specific questions on Member Sibley's?
Repeat, Chair.
We are at 12:03, and we have to wrap up at about 12:35. So I was asking if you want to drill down to the specific questions.
Chair, I have just about 2 more questions before I get to the specifics. Crave your indulgence, Chair. Chair, the question is the position permanent secretary a part of the advisory board?
No.
And the other question, is there a process now where you are seeing the procurement?
Yes.
And
yes.
you start seeing the procurement since 2018 or 2019?
Since 2018, all procurement activities, not specific to the hotel, but specific to NIF and their operations.
Yeah. Just to go to the findings.
And member, if I must point out, this is something that I have had to write to the Ministry of Finance about in terms of how they treat the NIF as a public body when it is in fact not a public body. So, for example, it was not until 2019, around about November 2019, I believe, that I realized that the Ministry of Finance sends the NIF its own budget call that I, as permanent secretary, prior to that, did not receive a copy. But the NIF got its own budget call, independent of the ministry.
Which lead to a few questions. So you have an advisory board. So you have administrative position, because an advisory board, is it that the advisory board is operational, or it has a department with various levels that somebody that heads it? Can you just explain that to us?
So the National Insurance Fund has a structure that is staffed with persons, so it would have a head and other, it has its own accounting function, it has staff that are established surrounding based on the various asset classes. So, for example, property management, they have assets that are, properties. You have someone who is in charge of equities, which is that someone who deals with equity investment, because the NIF is in and of itself an investment house, that is dealing with making investments, doing investment transactions that augur for the benefit of the national insurance scheme, so that the scheme can meet its long-term obligation in paying pensioners. So there's a whole structure there. And just to point to one of the things, or some of the things that we've done since that time, the structure at the NIF has been strengthened. So, for example, we have added an internal auditor. So the NIF prior didn't have its own internal auditor. And my ministry's internal audit unit, despite they producing quite a bit of audit reports, doing a very lots of audits, the NIF didn't have someone whose function was to focus on doing internal audits surrounding their operations. So we have strengthened the structure. We now have an internal auditor since last year. Since last year, took us a little bit of recruiting. We now also have the position of a risk manager, whereas previously we didn't have a position of a risk manager. And if anybody in here follows the newspaper, you will realize that we have been advertising over and over and over and over about 4 times. Am I exaggerating? But I think it's about 3 or 4 times. An extended period. For the last 2 years, we have been advertising for a risk manager, right? There's no investment house in Jamaica that manages $120 billion worth of investments and doesn't have a risk manager and a built-out risk management unit. So we have been working to improve and strengthen the structure at the NIF. Yeah, it's more than 2 years. Yeah.
PS, operationally, the NIF reports to the Ministry of Labor and Social Security.
Operationally?
Yes, I really need to understand where operationally this department report to. Does it report to the Ministry of Finance? Or
and you notice I'm smiling, member, because the law says that, oh, you can't see. The law says, the NIS Act says that the Minister of Finance is responsible for the fund, but it falls within the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Yes, so it is a bit of an anomaly and a conundrum, which I would say the Ministry of Finance, along with ourselves, are working to resolve. The Minister of Finance had appointed an NIF review commission, and I know that the work was done by, who did the work again? PwC. And that report, I know the Ministry of Finance is reviewing that report to take something to Cabinet, which based on those recommendations, we're hoping that we will be able to get out of some of the conundrum that we find ourselves in now.
But we tell your mic not seem to be working. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. You said that the Ministry of Finance is responsible for the NIF, but
the investment.
For the investment,
but it falls under my ministry.
Right, so that's what I was asking.
It's a conundrum. It's you know,
yes,
who
what
ultimately
kind
really is
of what kind of
responsible.
responsibility do the Ministry of Labour have in terms of the operations of the NIF? What? Because you are here seeking to answer questions, because it is a department of your ministry. Mm-hmm. So it is difficult to say that, you know, it's the sole responsibility of the Ministry of Finance, because if that were the case, then you wouldn't be here answering these questions. So I just want to know what sort of responsibility do you have in that regard?
Yes, so I didn't say that it was the sole responsibility of the Ministry of Finance. What I said is that investment decisions, the investment of the fund, right? The law says it is the minister with responsibility for finance.
Yes, I understand. So I'm just
that
asking
is responsible. But we find ourselves in a conundrum because the be-all and end-all of this department is investment.
Right.
But it falls under my ministry. And over the years, when certain types of investment decisions are required to be made, it will be referred to the Ministry of Finance or the Minister of Finance to sign off on a decision that is made. You have the advisory board, but then constitutionally you have the permanent secretary, but the permanent secretary is really not involved in the decisions and what takes place there.
My question was just to find out, you know, what kind of responsibility you have, seeing that you're the person who, you know.
Member, in my opinion, my responsibility is to ensure that they have adequate staff, or the structure that is required for them to execute, and also, since this audit, to ensure that whatever rules or procedures that are established that needs to be followed, to ensure that those are done in keeping with the various guidelines.
Member Sibley's, we're at 12:15. I'm going to urge you to get to the specific questions because we soon be kicked out of here.
PS, on page 19, could you to page 19 for me, please? The same internal audit. Yes.
Go ahead, members.
I know that the findings, the scope of the audit focuses between 2012 to 2018. 2017, thank you. During that time, it was the advisory board that had oversight of the hotel?
Yes, but member, I have with me Mrs. Audrey Dare Williams, and at the time she was in charge of the NIF. She can also help with answering some of the questions, so I hope you don't mind if from time to time I call on her.
I don't mind, Chair.
Okay.
I don't. To the Chair, I really don't mind.
Okay, all right. But at all time there has been an advisory board, and up to 2014 was the first board was appointed from NIF Resort.
Yes, because prior to that, the arrangement for the hotel was a different arrangement. The arrangement was it was leased to an operator. The operator left, and coming out of the procurement process, a new mayor was appointed as a manager for the property.
Now, what I must point out is that NIF Resort Company was established in 2014. So prior to that, you did not have the resort company.
And that would have been consequent on the previous lessee vacating the premises for whatever reasons. Yeah.
Okay. The fourth paragraph, I'll just move quickly to the fourth paragraph on the subheading, procurement of consultants and other suppliers. It reads, for the period November 15, 2012 to December 22, 2014, the sum of $471,448.28 US dollars, that is, was paid to KRONOS. Of this amount, five payments totaling US $255,729.94 relating to professional fees. Some of these invoices refer to project coordination, which include developing templates for evaluation. Further down, it said a contract was not presented that confirmed that KRONOS, the company, was retained beyond May 2013. Only two contracts were seen. First, 2011, and the second commenced October 1st, 2012 for the period of 8 months. The question is, having gotten this finding, what was the process that was taken by the company to inquire whether or not value for money work was done? Because it is saying that only 2 contracts were signed, but the company was paid beyond this. Was it that work was done and no contract was formulated, or no work was done and payment was made?
Remember, I can categorically say it's not the latter case. In fact, I don't know if the auditors made, how much effort was made in trying to find and locate the contracts. As far as I'm aware, the contracts are supposed to be at the office. So I'm not, I can't answer beyond that.
Well, P.S. The country need to know whether or not there's contract or there's no contract, what exactly, because now we are getting contradicting responses with regards to the auditor's report and what a member of the management team is saying that there ought to be contracts that are there.
In fact, I must add that this relationship was an ongoing relationship for a number of years. So the first time that the company was engaged was when we had an issue with the sitting tenant at the time. The tenant, that was around 2011, 2010, 2011 it started. And the tenant raised a number of issues. Nearing 2011, they indicated that based on the financial crisis of 2008, they were having challenges operating the property. And in fact, they claimed force majeure under the lease. The NIF objected, and the matter went to arbitration. the NIF prevailed at the arbitration, but it became clear that the tenant intended to leave, and in fact, they eventually left. And so the board at the time was faced with a challenge. This asset represented nearly 5% of the total net asset value of the fund at the time. So it's a significant investment. We did not want to have the hotel closed and not operating because it would have a significant impact on the fund. So at the same time, we could not publicly try and identify another operator when there was a sitting operator, because then we could face another legal issue. So the board at the time decided to engage a company. In fact, the recommendation came from the board on a company which was successful in identifying operators within the industry. And so that was how the relationship started, for us to try and identify someone in case and in all probability after the tenant had left. After that, after they left, we did start the procurement process to identify a long-term tenant, a long-term operator for the property. And the same company was engaged to help us to identify and did the work and did help us to identify Melia, who is operating through a procurement process. And the PS did say that there is staff, but the staff is limited. At the time, it was only 17 persons managing nearly $100 million. So we needed the resource to help us to effectively manage this process in a timely fashion.
May I say something here? Just following on your comments, it here states clearly that no document were presented. Terms of reference, neither was method used to solicit and select the vendor, proposals submitted by candidates, evaluation done by auditors. None of these documents were supplied. Neither was the contract seen. So it kind of goes contradictory to your statement.
No, well, it doesn't mean that the documents are not there, though.
I'm not saying they are not there or not there. I'm just working with the information presented, and it says quite clearly, no document was presented that indicate contractual arrangement was extended to the project management. So I'm just, if there is documentation, I would have assumed that this would have been provided to the auditors.
I can't speak to why it wasn't provided, but I know for each engagement, there was a new contract done.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Member Clark.
May I first and I'm very sorry, Madam, I did not get the name.
I'm Audrey Dear Williams.
Audrey?
Dear Williams.
Dear Williams.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes, sir.
Page 19 of the internal auditor's report, quarterly report, audit report, sorry. Findings. And at section 3, subsection 1, subsection 1, it speaks to procurement. And this is the finding of the audit, Mr. Chairman. Examination reveals that there were inconsistency in the application of the GOJ procurement guidelines prior to the approval of the exclusion order. It was found that suppliers who received millions of dollars were selected via direct contracting method. Additionally, on several occasions, there was no transparency in the selection and evaluation of service providers, as relevant records were not provided. Mr. Chairman, I am at a loss that the internal audit quarterly report that is presented to us as a document that is guiding us along. Mrs. Dear Williams is speaking contrary somewhat to this document, because what Mrs. Dear Williams is saying to us and want us to believe as a person that was in charge of that department, that though the document is saying, the audit report is saying to us that they couldn't find any contractual arrangement or any relevant records relevant to the matter at hand. She's saying that it was there.
What I'm going to do, the internal auditor is in fact here, and I'm going to seek some clarity here. What I understand Mrs. Dear Williams to be saying is that the documents were there, but maybe not seen by the internal auditor. So I'm going to ask the internal auditor if you could speak to this specific point.
Good afternoon, everyone. We indeed had requested the documents, however, we did not receive, as indicated in the report.
Sorry, just identify yourself, please.
Sure. My name is Lucian Smith, Acting Chief Internal Auditor in the ministry.
So you're saying go ahead.
So as indicated in the report, we would have asked for the relevant documents. We did not get these documents when we conducted the audit or when the management response was received. If you look at, let me get the correct page. We identified about 5 suppliers. Page 21, the top of it. We would have identified at least 5 suppliers where we had requested procurement documents, and the results are in the table as provided. We maintain the evidence reviewed showed that suppliers were engaged via direct contract in contravention of the regulations.
And let me ask, subsequent to the audit and the management response, have these documents been supplied or provided?
Not to date.
So, Mr. Chairman, the next question that I would ask, through you to Mr.
Smith.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
How long did this quarterly report took to put together?
We had submitted that report in September 2018.
No, man, how long did it take you to do all the internal auditing and then to tabulate it in one document?
It was about 1.5 months in 2017.
1.5 months.
Yes.
And during that 1.5 months, when you were going through, you had asked for the documents that are relevant to the said matter, and it was not presented to you.
We would have identified the importance of having such documents, and we would have requested whether verbally or in writing. And as the table shows, those are the only documents we got in relation to.
Mr. Smith, my time. We would have or we had?
We had.
Well, I mean, would have suggests that you're not certain whether you did or not, you know.
Sure, no problem. I apologize.
No problem, sir. It is what it is.
Yes.
We would have means that it is the intention.
No,
but you can't specifically say that we did or we had. So I would rather you tell this committee whether you actually had or you didn't, but not would have.
All right, let me retract that. We did ask for the information orally and in writing.
And only on page 21, only the 3 of the 5 suppliers you were provided with the documentation to allow you to make the determination as to whether they adhere to the government guidelines?
And that is correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, by virtue of the presentation on page 21, in that same second heading, contracts and adherence to government of Jamaica guidelines, we can now safely say or believe that only 3 out of the 5 that has been submitted to date. Correct? Adhere to. Well, he would have seen it. He said adhere to government guidelines. So that means he would have seen it, and when he checked through it, everything was up to the standard. Is that correct, sir?
Sir, could you repeat?
He's asking the question if only 3 of the 5 listed in the table would have adhered to government guidelines based on the information you were provided.
That is correct.
Okay.
And therefore, Mr. Chairman, I will now ask Mrs. Dear Williams, since then, can she safely say to us that these documents for Equilibrio Solution Project Manager and We Resolve, that those documents have been found?
Well, in terms of both of those companies, I did provide an answer in 2017 when I answered. I indicated that for Equilibrio, we did in fact start a procurement process.
Hold on, Madam. Mr. Chairman.
It is in my response that I think is supposed to be attached to the report.
It is in the response at the back of the report.
Chair, if I may just ask.
Wait, 1 second. One second, member, please. Member guy said he just.
I'm not asking a question, Chair. I'm just asking if she could, if Mrs. Williams, for ease of reference, could guide us as to where in your management response at the back you had.
It's on page 59, procurement of consultants, paragraph.
Yes, I want to know
2.
where. If you could tell us which paragraph,
Number 2 and
because
3.
time is of the essence.
Numbers 2 and 3.
Yeah. On page 59. Member guy, you had a follow-up on this point? No, I'm not leaving you now. He just said. Okay, all right.
You move, Mr. Chairman.
I'm not moving.
If I read number 2 in on that page, under the heading Procurement of Consultant and Other Suppliers, selection of Equilibrio, the Secretariat started the procurement process to identify a suitable project manager. Evidence can be provided if required, and I underline, if required. However, because of the tight timeline, it was decided that Equilibrio should be selected by sole source. The principal of the company were determined to have the requisite qualification and experience to execute the project management in the required time frame. My question today, Mr. Chairman, through you, to Mrs. Dear Williams, where are these documents that the internal auditor would have requested on 2 occasions, 1 verbally, 2 in writing? That is my question.
The best answer I can give, because I'm no longer in the section, is that it should be at the NIF. I don't have them, that I know. So they should be in the records of the NIF.
But the problem is at the time, hold on. The problem is at the time of the report, when the request would have been made, the internal auditor would not have been provided with the documents. And if those documents existed, what the committee is struggling to understand is why those documents were not provided if they existed at the time.
So, Mr. Chairman,
or even subsequent.
So, Mr. Chairman, the person, because Mrs. Dear Williams is saying that she's not in charge of that department anymore, is the person who is in charge of that department here with us today?
Pierce, can you help me?
Yes, the person who is in charge of that department is here today. However, committee members, that person joined the NIF years after, and you would realize that these are decisions that would have been taken from in 2012. And so in 2019 or 2020, when somebody new comes, it's hard to ask that person to find documents from 8 years prior. But what I want to highlight to the committee is that as permanent secretary, what the audit pointed to me was that there were weaknesses as it relates to procurement and adherence to the government of Jamaica's procurement guidelines. And so we have set about, or had set about, on a path of ensuring that whatever is done at the NIF follows the guidelines as stipulated, which is now an act. As a matter of fact, back then it was guidelines. Now it's an act of Parliament that Parliament passed some years ago in terms of stipulating how you go about certain types of procurement.
Let me ask a question, 1 second. To the internal auditor, has there been any follow-up since this 2018 internal audit report related to specifically the operations of the hotel to get the outstanding information, find out, has there been any follow-up since?
There has not been any follow-up. The audit of the nature of the audit was that it related to the refurbishing and renovation. So when that work was completed and we did the audit, because it's a one-off activity, we did not go back and find out what the situation was.
Mr. Chairman, I am asking through you, sir, that the ministry, we either write asking or instructing the ministry to present copies of that document or those documents to us.
Mrs. Dear Williams, as the person who was in charge, it is important for closure, right, that this information be supplied. You are saying you know they were there, right? But unfortunately, the written documentation, which includes the management response, doesn't have these documents provided. If they are there, they need to be provided so it can be, this issue can be closed, and that we don't have, certainly based on the conclusion, that entities did not meet the government requirements because the auditor simply couldn't find any documents. So if they are there, I don't think it can be difficult or unreasonable for those documents to be identified. There must be proper filing systems that would retain those documents because these contracts were relatively large sums of money. Now, obviously, there's nothing wrong with sole sourcing once there is a process and justification, etc., etc. But again, the committee would want to know that those processes were employed to come to the conclusion of sole sourcing. So it is important for the committee to be satisfied that those things were actually done, and based on what we have in front of us, we can conclude that.
Chairman, I was in the queue a long time.
Yes, member.
Thank you. Chairman, the matter that Member Clark spoke on just now runs similar to the concern I had when I raised my hand, because very often, as has been the experience here and in many sittings of the PAC, even with the AG's report, whether annual or specific reports, that the entities were not able to provide the AG's department with certain information. And we see when they come to the PAC, there's a management response that speaks differently from the original management response to the initial audit, even the exit audit from the PAC's officers, the AG's officers. Now, I think it is incumbent on this PAC to mandate the ministry and the department to have those documents presented to this committee. It's not only for closure, Chairman, I agree with you for closure, but also to ensure that the guidelines are followed and the process is really known, not only for having that, but also for the future, so the learning curve will not have to be done a second time. We need to know, I mean, we are custodians as a PAC of the spend of taxpayers' money, and it is something that we need to ferret out and see where the weaknesses were and what recommendations can be done, because the truth is that at the end of each term of the PAC, there's a report made, and a report that is submitted and tabled in the Parliament with recommendations from the PAC, even though the AG and the respective ministries, departments, and agencies have recommendations. The Public Accounts Committee appointed by Parliament responds to those concerns and make recommendations. So unless we know that, we can't make a recommendation. So those are the reasons why we, as a committee, ought to mandate the ministry to have those documentations sent to us.
I just, to close this particular matter, before I come to you, Member Wilson, that the committee, the contrast, because I know I saw certainly one contract for Kronos at the back. The other contracts should be provided here. If they are in the possession of the NIS, then we need to know, and the internal auditor needs to be provided as well, so you can update this to determine whether the documentation satisfies you that government guidelines were met. It is important too that there are two things. You don't want a cloud to remain if in fact there is documentation which has information which could correct it, right? Because it is people's reputations that are on the line here. But it, quite frankly, is unacceptable that, 3 years later, this report could be provided, and if the documents are at the ministry, that they were not furnished so that the report could be updated and provided to us. Member Wilson?
Thank you, Chair. Following up on Kronos, if I pronounce it correctly, KRONOS, Investment Development, I saw 3 distinct notes which is of concern to me. The first one, which is on page 19, on the procurement of consultants and other supplies. Number 3 is of serious concern, where the client history revealed that initial payment of $5,000, which was required on signing of the agreement, was paid before the contract was endorsed by the ministry. That is of particular concern. I would want some response as to why that would have happened. And also, the second point is also quite worrying, where it says the success fee was to be computed based on the lease or sale of the hotel. However, nothing in the proposal that stated how Kronos would be compensated if there was a management agreement. So again, that is also of worrying concern. So I'm just asking Mrs. Dare Williams, as the person in charge at that point, if you could just respond to those 2 concerns.
Sorry. Regarding the query on the 5,000, in my response, again, I asked for clarification at the time. This is 2017. I asked for clarification as we had not found the information referred to. So I did ask for clarification at the time on that 5,000. It is in my response that is attached to the report. And in relation
I'm going to review that, but could you answer a question, the second question I posed?
About the management agreement, I would have to get some recollection there. It is perhaps correct that we did not have. I would have to look, Chairman. I don't recall offhand.
Members, just before you come in, Member Wilson, we have time constraint, and the marshal is signaling me. What I'm going to do, because we're not finished, and we can't finish today, I'm going to ask, based on the outstanding documents which have been requested, that those documents be provided to the committee for next week's sitting, that the internal auditors also be provided with it, so that the internal auditors can give us a perspective and a view on the submission of the documents, whether it changes materially what you have concluded in the audit report, and that we conclude next week given our time constraint here. Yes, Member Sibley.
Chair, with the PS said something earlier with regards to the person who is in charge of the NIF. I do not agree with her perspective on the matter, because when you take a position and there's an inquiry in the matter, it's not that you are accepting fault that was done or anything from somewhere else, but it is that person who has the authority to get certain documents or to direct the staff to find certain documents to provide the answers. So it is in that spirit that we would want the person to be able to speak to the documents, being that they are the person now in charge.
Sorry, okay. So member, I think maybe there may have been some misunderstanding in terms of what you are asking. My impression was that you are asking if the person who was now in charge, if they were asked to provide those documents. That had not been asked because, as I said, the person came on in 2019. This audit was in 2017, and I would not have then presented them with a 2-year-old audit to say, do a response. However, I need to make it clear that Mrs. Dare Williams has always been allowed access if she needed to prepare the response. So I would ask that both herself, along with Mr. McIntosh, who is now in charge, to find whatever documents that may be required to sufficiently respond to the audit.
And I notice, just a final comment, I notice with my query about that 5,000 prepayment, if we want to call it that, the response was directed straight back at the internal auditor where she needed clarity on the query. So through your chair, we would want to ensure that the internal auditor provide whatever documentation Mrs. Dare Williams would need based on her response here.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
All right, members. Earlier in my opening remarks, I had made reference to the Ministry of Finance's audit of the Auditor General's Department, and the clerk had expressed a view about whether the PAC could review it. I'm going to ask the Legal Counsel to Parliament, Ms. Shanae Cunningham, to give us a response.
Hi, so good afternoon, everyone. Shanae Cunningham. Okay, so as the chair said, there was a question regarding this committee examining the annual audit report that was tabled last week. So I reviewed the Financial Administration and Audit Act, the relevant standing orders, and the Constitution. The FAA Act wasn't helpful because it doesn't deal with reports on the Auditor General. Also, the Standing Order 69 that deals with this committee only addresses reports by the Auditor General. However, it is my view that the Constitution itself is helpful because Section 122(4) of the Constitution states or sets out provisions that that the provisions that deal with the functions and reports of the Auditor General shall also apply to the Minister of Finance's audits and reports on the Auditor General. So it is on that basis I am of the view that the PAC may examine that report as tabled because reports of the Auditor General as tabled come to this committee.
What section, Council?
Section 122(4) of the Constitution deals with reports that the auditing of the Auditor General by the Minister of Finance and the reports that the Minister would generate.
And just to be clear, it can be examined without a referral from the full Parliament.
That is my understanding. But,
Okay.
to be clear, the standing order does not say anything about reports on the Auditor General, but just on the basis of the Constitution. I think there's enough room to say that on that basis the report can come here. However, the standing orders do not stay.
Okay, thank you. All right, members, so we will resume next week, Tuesday. We will continue with the report on the NIF Result Management Board. We have asked for some outstanding documentation, which we expect by next week. And I don't know how long it will take, but if we can conclude that, we will also look at the Ministry of Finance's audit of the Auditor General's Department. Can I have a motion for the adjournment? Member Wilson, seconded by Member Charles. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.